Most would remember the abrupt end to Beams' second tenure at the Pies from the start of 2018 to the end of 2020. Many are quick to point to the salary cap space that was given up to reacquire Beams. Some mention his off-field battles and even the fact we gave away 2 first-round picks for a 28-year-old. However, what many of you might forget is the 2014 trade that initially sent Dayne Beams to Brisbane, what we got for it and what it actually means today for the Collingwood Football Club. And yes, we are still reaping the benefits of that auspicious trade. Maybe not promising at the time of the trade, certainly now would be considered one of the best trades Collingwood made in recent years. Dayne Beams was initially taken in the national draft at pick 29. A big-bodied midfielder with established senior experience prior to the AFL, representing Southport Australian Football Club. Beams was thrusted into a Collingwood side that was previously a middle-of-the-pack side for the preceding years amidst the mini-rebuild that essentially began around 2004/2005. Beams was the immediate impact that the Pies needed to propel themselves into immediate flag contention.
Gets his first goal in AFL football. Taken number 29 in last year's draft. Impressed during the pre-season, looked as though in the pre-season he was here to stay, looked as though he belonged, and he's certainly shown that and a bit more this afternoon.
Beams averaged 17 disposals and nearly a goal a game in his rookie year for the Pies. 2010 would mark the completion of an incredible run for the Pies, winning a flag as the second youngest team ever to do so with an average age of 24 years and 57 days. 2012 and 2013 would be Beams' most prominent years as a Pie, averaging nearly 30 disposals and a goal a game across the 2 seasons. Beams was essentially the highly alluring midfielder that all AFL clubs would dream of, a big-bodied midfielder that can kick goals. By 2014, the Pies had fallen off a cliff, landing back into the middle of the pack of the league. A genuine shock considering how young they were when they won the flag in 2010. Perhaps the dramatic fall in success played a part in the consideration for Beams to request a trade away from the Pies back to his home state, Queensland. Beams expressed his wish to return home so that he could spend much needed time with his ill father, as well as taking the opportunity to play with his younger brother, Clay Beams. Now, let's fast track to the trade in 2018 and then we can work our way back to the 2014 trade thereafter, as I typically like to leave things on a joyous note.
You appeared to recommit to the Lions at their best and fairest. Take us inside that night. Do you regret that, and how have you left things at Brisbane?
Oh, I don't regret it. In hindsight, looking at it now, it probably sent the wrong message. But you got to understand, at the time, I thought I was still going to be a Brisbane Lions player, and the message I sent to my teammates, I stand by. I love my teammates at the Brisbane Lions.
Despite Beams pouring out his heart in front of his Brisbane team, declaring his loyalty to the Lions' future, it would ultimately count for nothing as he was traded in the final half hour of the deadline. Sure, the Pies did give up a bit in trade capital as well as salary cap space, but how bad was it truly? Plenty points out to the negative impacts he could have had on the team given his issues with addiction and grief, which Collingwood were aware of leading into this trade. Collingwood firstly gave up pick 21, who Brisbane ended up taking Eli Smith with, who played a grand total of 0 games at AFL level. The only player in the top 21 of that draft to not play a game. A total bust looking back at it. Yes, you can make the point that maybe the Pies could have used that trade themselves on another draft prospect or another established AFL player in a trade. But at the time, Beams had his second best year to date and was named in the All-Australian team that year, despite playing in a lousy Lions team that could only manage 5 wins for the year. Totally justified, no? The Pies also gave pick 17 to the Lions, who would trade it away to Port, and Port would subsequently draft Mitch Georgiades, a reasonable AFL player at this point, dealing with an ACL and the typical time that it takes to bite it as a young key forward. Perhaps the type of player the Pies could use these days, but in saying that, Georgiades is by no means a number 1 key tall yet. He barely fits the needs to fit the second key tall forward role at the moment. Pies also gave pick 58, which wasn't used to add to the Lions draft capital. And on the other side, the Pies also received pick 41 and pick 44 to also add to their draft points capital to secure father-son prospects such as Will Kelly and also academy player Isaac Quaynor. That's not so bad after all, right? In the end, the picks we gave up maybe wasn't the worst case, considering how they've all panned out thus far. And it must be said that the Pies were bearing in mind that they were going to have access to academy players and father-son products at discounted costs. The other issue with this trade was the fact that Dayne Beams would have been asking for a great chunk of cash considering the needs of the Pies and the form of a firing Dayne Beams. What that agreed amount was, we won't know as the salaries in the AFL are quite confident, dissimilar to the NBA and NFL, where most are fully disclosed. Finally, the trade looks far worse than what it actually might have been because of the way Dayne Beams' career rounded out with the Pies. Underperforming on the field, underlying issues outside of footy, with Beams succumbing to vices such as gambling and drug abuse.
There are fears tonight for the health of troubled Collingwood star Dayne Beams. The premiership player was knocked out after crashing his car into a power pole in Melbourne's east and spent the night in hospital, Mark Santomartino reports.
Beams called it quits in 2020, having played only 9 games in his second stint with the club. And now we can all concede that the 2018 trade was a complete disaster for all parties involved, and I can feel your eyes burning through the screen right now. But now allow me to take this chance to turn your frown upside down and show you how good the 2014 trade was, and still is, for Collingwood. Firstly, Collingwood received Jack Crisp, who could only manage to string together 18 games in 3 seasons in a miserable Lions side that hadn't seen the dawn of light since 2005. Return on investment for Jack Crisp was seen effective immediately in his first year, donning the black and white in 2015, collecting 22 disposals a game and nearly a goal a game, which was his best scoring average for a season in his entire career to date. Crisp, now a premiership player, and also has the record for the most current consecutive games in the AFL, lacing together 225 games on the trot. Maybe this would be crazy to suggest when the trade was first completed, but you could almost make the case now that the direct swap between Crisp and Beams was an overall win for the Pies in this trade-off. Next up, Collingwood received pick 25, who he ended up trading to North Melbourne for the pig, Levi Greenwood, at age 26 by the way. Probably a smart trade considering we may have been lacking a bit of experience leading into the latter years of the 2010s. Greenwood was coming off a career year at North in 2014, averaging 25 disposals and almost a goal a game, kicking a snag in 75% of his 22 games that year. Just the kind of player that we needed. Levi quickly became a fan favourite, thanks to his intent on the ball and relentless attitude on the field. Although Levi never reached the heights of his career year at North in 2014, Levi would be an integral piece to the team in many ways beyond what the stat sheet would ever indicate. Pig would end up playing 86 games for Collingwood, and maybe a couple more seasons would have been possible, if not for the unfortunate call to retire due to ongoing concussion issues that had plagued him since the incident with Big Nick Naitanui. With the pick 25 that we gave to North, they selected Dan Nielsen, who played 7 AFL games before being delisted. Look away, North fans. Pick 24 was Jack Steele, and pick 26 was premiership player Toby McLean. Yikes. After all of this, surely those 2 plays received would be enough to quench the furor and consider the trade as at least a break even for the Pies, right? Well, actually, we went one better than just breaking even. In that 2014 trade, Brisbane Lions also handed over pick 5, and with that pick, Collingwood took none other than Jordan De Goey. JDG up until this point is a premiership player for the Pies and the ultimate break glass in case of emergency player, the type of player who you can call upon in a must-win finals game. Here are a few games that spring to mind. 2018 GWS semi-final, 14 touches, 3 goals, and kicking the eventual winning goal.
He scores! And there's a bit going on here. They're coming from everywhere. This has got all in all over it. To go, he wants a piece of lob.
2018 Tigers prelim final, 10 touches, 4 goals, and 3 of them in the first half to bury the Tigers beneath a 44-point lead to seal a grand final date.
Beautiful thing if you're a player supporter. To go, left foot snap, another one. Collingwood here with 5 first quarter goals.
2018 grand final. Despite the loss, 13 disposals and 3 goals, including that mesmerising goal early in the game.
Oh yes, yes, you knew he could do it because he's a great special player.
2019 qualifying final, 26 disposals and 2 goals against Geelong.
In penalties, 300.
Just last year in the preliminary final against GWS, 34 disposals and a career high 17 contested possessions against the Giants. And finally, 2023 grand final, 18 disposals and 2 goals. Who remembers this goal that will be etched in Collingwood's folklore until the end of time?
Centre got away handball. De Goey on the move. Turns around, he's centred it, he's got it. De Goey's kicked the goal and put Collingwood back in front.
So in the grand scheme of things, where do you stand within all these variables that had taken place throughout both trades? Overall, did Collingwood win entirely, or did they still lose? Despite still reaping the rewards of that early 2014 trade re De Goey and Jack Crisp, could we potentially accept that the personal downfall of Dayne Beams was a philosophical learning for the club as a whole? Did it further galvanise the club, teach the upcoming players how to manage adversities of the real world and not succumb to them?
That stopped. I just replaced it with the drugs. So the drugs was like a relatively short addiction, but did so much more damage to me, mentally, physically than the gambling did. Like it was such a bigger challenge to get off that than it was the gambling.
Like we saw with Beams, drugs, gambling, and grief. These are all things that plague the world as a whole on a daily basis. And in the end, I would like to sign off by saying thank you to Dayne Beams for the joys of the early 2010s. And mate, I hope you are thriving in life in whatever endeavour you find yourself immersed in today. Go Pies.
Stepping away from football was probably the smartest and best thing for my life. Like I said, I couldn't be happier. Like I spend, all my spare time now with my kids, and my wife, and I just try and be the best husband and father that I can be.